Hey, Julie, thanks for being back with us today for another episode of the WinShape Marriage Podcast.
This is going to be fun.
How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Yes.
We are talking about marriage and parenting. And I know I'm not a mom yet. I do hope to be one day. But I know that you are a mom. I know some of our production crew in the room, they're moms and dads. And also I know a lot of people listening to this, they're moms and dads. Or if they aren't, they hope to be one day. And so I'm hoping that they'll find this conversation informative. I'm expecting to learn a lot from it. So we'll just jump right in. For the sake of getting us started, we'll just start with a scenario that I'm sure a lot of people run into, and that is they have different ideas when it comes to parenting their children. So maybe one of them is a little bit more lenient, errs on the lenient side, and then the other might consider themselves to be the disciplinarian. And I'm just kind of curious, sometimes that difference in dynamics can cause some tension for their marriage. It's already kind of tense or challenging parenting, and then it kind of creates some of that tension in their marriage relationship as well. And so how do you go about doing that? What's a good first step to figuring out how to navigate that dynamic where you've got different styles and you don't want it to cause and create tension in your marriage?
I think a great place to start is what's your end goal? So the goal is for children to grow and go. And you, as the parents, have been given this opportunity to take them on a journey and disciple them through the process, preparing them to actually fly when they leave the nest. And so thinking about the goal, and then coming back to, how was I raised? I was raised with lots of rules and lots of structure. And I married a man who was not raised with a lot of rules and a lot of structure. I mean, very, very different.
Yeah.
And so we had to sit down and have a conversation about what did it look like and what did we want in our home. So it's not just my way, but what is our way? And that speaks to parental involvement. I know couples where the husband traveled Monday through Thursday, came home, and mom felt like, I've had to be the disciplinarian the whole entire time you've been gone. And now you walk back through the door and it's just playtime with the kids. And that's uncomfortable for me. I would like to talk about how we do this differently. And then I've had other scenarios where dads really want to be engaged, and mom says, you're not holding her right. You don't feed him that way. I can't believe you brought him dressed like that to church. And so all of a sudden, dad's like, wait a second, am I second string? Am I not a good parent? And so lots of conversation needs to go into, and there's some fabulous books, which we can include with this podcast, about what does healthy parenting look like. And I for sure can say that God intended both mom and dad to be engaged in this process. And sometimes, it takes a little bit of trial and error. Sometimes one feels more strongly about something than the other one was. Jay feels very strongly about what respect looks like.
Okay.
And I had a little bit different picture of that. And so we had to have conversation around, okay, how do we do this and do it well as parents?
Yeah. You said a lot of things there that I think we can break down in this episode. So I definitely want to get to some of those roles. Maybe we'll save that for just a second. But I first want to talk about something you said there at the end, which is we had to have a lot of those conversations about what that looks like. So talk me through that first. When you're just starting out, you're having those conversations. How are we going to parent them? Even if it's what do we want to feed them, or how do we want to teach them the meaning of respect, or all of these things? What are their boundaries, bedtime, et cetera, et cetera? When you're having those conversations about parenting, how should you have those conversations? Where should those take place? What does that look like?
I think a really good thing to remember is that children thrive in homes where there are routines, rituals, consistency, and structure. So if you use that as your baseline for your conversation, what are the routines that are important for us? And we said having dinner together. So even when Ashley was little, we still had dinner together, and we had really appropriate expectations about what a 2-year-old can do at the dinner table or a 3-year-old. But we're laying the groundwork for the future. So we started young with getting into a routine of we do these things. This is what bedtime in our house looks like. And even when she was an infant, we would put her to bed and we would pray over her. So prayer at nighttime, we were establishing routines, things that she could count on. And that's what children need. They need those routines, rituals, consistency, and structure because that's how they order their world. And, they come into the world really selfish, like it's all about me. And we have to make sure that we are caring for them in the process of putting all those things in place so that as they grow and we are continuing to prepare them to go, we're teaching in the process. So early on, thinking about that and then asking yourself the question, hey, what really matters for us? There were words that we said would not be said in our home. We don't say shut up to each other. We don't treat each other disrespectfully. Our mantra, hands are for helping, not for hurting. I mean, we were just putting things in place that set the tone for what's the atmosphere going to be like in our home. So all of those conversations in the beginning and then figuring out, okay, well, I had all these rules. You didn't. So I don't think it's so much about rigidity. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for what helps children to thrive and to grow and to feel safe, where I can make a mistake and it's going to be okay.
Right.
People are going to love me. How do we create an environment where our children know there's nothing you could do that could make me love you more, and there is nothing you can do that will make me love you less?
That's really beautiful. So having those conversations is a great starting point of what are some of those rhythms and rituals that we can instill in our family for the sake of our children, but also to instill healthy family dynamics, which will then spur on a healthier marriage dynamic too. We're a unified front. We're coming at this from a team, like we are partners in this, and we're presenting that unified front.
Yes.
So what if, I'm sure there are going to be things though that you still you don't disagree, or you don't agree on, rather you disagree on. So you're like, I just don't see the same perspective of this. I'm not really sure of an example, maybe a curfew or something like that when they're older, or if they should get a car or not, or a new car, or an old car, whatever the case may be. So when you're having those conversations, it's easy to have conversations about establishing positive rhythms and rituals, right? Oh yeah, there's not a disagreement on if we're going to pray over our daughter at bedtime. Of course we're going to pray over her at bedtime. But you might run into some tension when you're coming across making a decision that you don't agree on. So what then?
So those conversations happen behind closed doors. And it's really important to understand, to go deep. I can give you a great example of a couple. They were actually in extreme disagreement about their daughter getting her driver's license. And the mom and the daughter, the dad really felt like they had been conspiring behind his back for her to get her license. Mom was very excited about it. And that frustrated the father even more, that he felt like his teammate wasn't on his team. Mom was very frustrated with dad because he was so adamant about his daughter not getting her driver's license. And they had argued back and forth for about 6 months about this. Well, one day they had the opportunity to take things a little bit deeper. And so the question was asked of the mom, what is behind your real exuberance and enthusiasm about our daughter getting her driver's license. And in 6 months of conversation, it had never come up that every day she was late to work and she left early in order to take their daughter to school and pick her up. And it created an inordinate amount of stress on her. And she felt like her coworkers really felt like she wasn't doing her job thoroughly because she was coming in late and leaving early. And so she felt like their daughter getting her driver's license would take some pressure off of her.
Yeah.
That was news to her husband. And then the husband had the opportunity to talk about why he was just so adamant about her not getting her driver's license. And what he shared is that he used to be a police officer. And he would have to go and knock on the door of a parent's home and tell them that their child had been in a really bad accident, because so many teenagers, their prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed. Right. And so they just sometimes make not good choices. And so that was very scary for him. And now he's an insurance adjuster. So he also understands the chances are very high. Teenage drivers have accidents. And so he was very concerned for the safety of their daughter. Well, neither of them had taken into consideration what was actually underneath their planted stance.
Yeah, their heels in the ground.
Yes, heels in the ground about, how they felt about this. So once that was on the table, they actually were able to have a very different conversation. And the conversation went something along the lines of, what would you feel comfortable with? And where they landed was letting her get her driver's license with parameters. You can go to school and come home. You cannot have anybody in the car with you, and you can't go anywhere but to school and home. And let's just see how that goes for several months. And if we feel like that's going well, then we might loosen things up and let you do a few more things. And both mom and dad felt really good about that. And so they landed in a good place where neither one of them were feeling like they had been run over by the other. And I think that that's a great example of being able to ask, what's behind my strong feelings about this? Yeah. Is it fear, safety oriented, or am I concerned that something bad could happen in our home? Those kinds of things are helpful in the midst of trying to make decisions.
And isn't that true about so many things? Like, it's usually something deeper below the surface that's going on.
Or an experience you had in childhood.
Right. Yeah. That informs what you're bringing to the table. So what's important from that example that I hear, though, is they worked that out, it sounds like, together. Like, they didn't bring the daughter into the mix, right? No. Or they weren't having conversations with her. So they worked that out as a team to then present that unified front.
Yes.
To their
and I'm not saying you don't ever give your child the opportunity to speak into something. Let's take curfew. They could come and say, Mom and Dad, I think my curfew's unfair. Well, okay. You have the opportunity to make your case about why you believe it's unfair.
Right.
We will listen to you, and then we will have a conversation and make a decision as a parenting team about any changes that we may feel are in order for your curfew, and we will let you know.
Yeah.
So
I think
there's opportunity for that as well.
I know you've talked about before, that problem-solving dynamic in front of your kids. So if you're having just conversations and conflict even in front of your kids in your marriage, is it okay? Is it okay to have conflict in front of them, or should you steer clear from that? What are your thoughts on doing that?
I think it's okay to have conflict in front of your children. In fact, I think it's really important to have conflict in front of your children. How you do that matters. So let's go back to what we were talking about before, beginning with the end in mind. What do you want for your children? If your children, I have young people say to me, I never, not one time, ever saw my parents have conflict. I just don't have a clue how to do that well. So I think it's important to actually do that in front of your children, but how you do it, modeling, hey, we can disagree. We can disagree, and we can be respectful of each other. I can say, I strongly disagree with you on that, whether it's politics or something else, and be able to have a respectful conversation. I want to hear your opinion. I want to understand where you're coming from with that. And as you're having this conversation and conflict, I think the other piece is it's really important for your children to see you to repair. Yeah. You can have a rip, but you need to come together and repair. So it may take a minute for you to think through what you want to do with that, how you want to come back and say, I did not handle myself well just now. I'm sorry. I'm tired, or I just shot off the handle here. And I want to say to you, I love you. I am very sorry that I did that. And I want to try again. And let your children actually see that, because you're teaching through the process, right? You're teaching them what it looks like to make a mistake, and that we are all sinners, and we all are gonna fail and make mistakes. So letting them actually see that you're not perfect. And what do when you make a mistake? You own it and you say, hey, that was not good on my part. Let me try that again. That's teaching them, and it's helping them to see we're not expecting you to be perfect. We recognize that you're also going to make mistakes. We expect you to own those mistakes. It's this accountability and responsibility. I have an accountability for me and how I handle myself, and a responsibility when I don't do well to own it. Right. Nobody else is going to own that.
I feel like when you hear that term, like discipleship as a parent, you know, you are responsible for discipling your kids. There's one great way to do that. Like, you, in order to disciple them, show them the right way, you take that account, or you have that accountability. You take that ownership piece, and that's one way to be a good discipler for your kids. Yeah. What are some other things in that kind of lane of, okay, as we're married, and then we're parenting our children, we are raising them in this godly home. That's our desire. That's our hope. What are some ways that we can disciple them in your family?
I think another really important way is to help them know you are not the center of attention all the time. Our culture has created this scenario where when children come along, it's like children are our first priority. They are front and center, and your marriage takes a back seat. And in situations like that, those are the marriages that are most at risk for distress. And it really creates a lot of instability in your home, because your children pick up on you're not doing well. And so the greatest gift that you can give your children is help them to understand you're not the center. You're not the center. The world does not revolve around you. And actually, our marriage is the priority. We're going to make sure you are well cared for, but our marriage is the priority. And thinking through, hey, what is it that creates this environment where our marriage thrives and is nourished and is flourishing? What does that look like? It looks like we make sure that we take time for ourselves. It looks like that we put our kids to bed. And, so often they'll say, I'm not tired. I'm not tired. You don't understand. Bedtime is not all about you. Bedtime is because we need time as adults. Yeah. We need our quiet time too. So you can be in your room, and if you're not sleepy, you can read a book. But technology's up, and everybody is quiet, and we are moving towards bed, going to sleep, because you need your rest and we need ours. So what does it look like for our marriage to be healthy? In doing that, it's like putting a big security blanket around your children. And when you think about that, like when you wrap yourself up in just a warm, comfy blanket, it feels secure. It feels safe. You feel comfort. You feel warmth. And when you feel those things, it's like,
you can take a breath.
You can take a breath. You don't feel anxiety. So for children, when they see their parents, even when you might be problem solving something through, they're not anxious. They don't feel stress and tension like, oh my goodness, mom and dad are not doing well and I need to come in and do something to be helpful, or I need to act out to take attention off of that so that they can focus on this over here.
Right.
So you focusing on your marriage and knowing these are when we are at our best, both individually and as a couple, and making sure that those things are a priority, that feeds your children in a healthy way and creates an environment where they can also thrive. Going back to what are your routines, rituals, consistency, and structure for your marriage? And what is that? What does that look like for your family as well? And then modeling it. Time alone for yourself, where you're doing your quiet time, or you're exercising, you're doing things that feed your soul, you're teaching your children. Oh, that's important. Those things matter. Things that you do as a couple, and then things that we do as a family that they can count on. It brings that consistency. It brings order. And that's what creates safety in a home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know I've heard you say before, which has been such an encouragement to me, even not having children yet, but anticipating that, is when you are healthy, the two of you are healthy, and your marriage is healthy, you can show up better for your kids. Like if you're feeling healthy and your role as wife or as husband, then you can then show up healthier and more whole in your role as mom and dad, which has really encouraged me even to think through ahead of time, like, okay, how can we not be perfect, but be working towards the best that we can be now, so that when our roles shift from just wife and husband to wife and husband and mom and dad, hopefully, that we can be better in our roles.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it just makes me laugh because it makes me think about I was called out more than once by my daughter because I'm a better person when I take care of me. And when I'm not, I can be high strung, I can be intense. And on more than one occasion, I've had my daughter say to me, did you work out today? Have you worked out lately? You're not the best version of you. And so I'm like, okay, duly noted. I need to do something different. So I think that speaks to a couple of things that really matter. One is, what does it look like to take care of you? But also, especially moms, I think we can often believe that the world is going to fall off of its axis if we leave dad in charge or we go away and we do something that's going to be life-giving to us. And I mean, you can think that too, because it's like the kids will say, "Mom, you're leaving us with dad. Oh my gosh."
Right.
But here's the thing. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so I really think it is important for children to know that, hey, parenting is a team effort. And I can remember having a conversation with Jay really early on, right before, I guess, Ashley was born. I said, hey, I really do mean that I want us to be a team. Yeah. I want you to know that I believe in you and I believe that you can parent Ashley every bit as well as I can. And I want Ashley to believe that I believe that you can parent her. So when it comes to dressing her or putting in pigtails or going and doing things with her, I really want you to do that. And I'm not going to discredit you in front of her, because if something were to happen to me, if I were to get sick, or I had to be away for some reason, I want her to know, hey, you're not second string. Right. You're definitely not babysitting her. You are fathering her. And you may not do things exactly the same way that I do them. And that's fine. God created us differently. And how dads show up, I mean, rough and tumble play, man, if you're really safety oriented as a mom, everything in you wants to go in when rough and tumble play is happening and say, somebody's going to get hurt in here. Right. And, don't come crying to me. Except for rough and tumble play with dad teaches limits and boundaries because we don't hit each other in the face. And rough and tumble play and the way that dad engages with children, it teaches empathy. So dads really play a very important role that is not to be diminished. And moms, we don't have it all when it comes to parenting. It really is, there is a reason why God gave children a mom and a dad.
I think that's so encouraging. And I'm so glad you circled back, because I was wanting us to circle back there kind of to wrap this up. I know we kind of teased it at the top of this episode about those roles in your family and what it looks like to thrive in your role as mom and dad. And I think that what you said was just so eloquent and encouraging just then. Do you have anything else that you would just kind of want to open it back up, if you have anything else related to, you know, that role that you bring as a mom, as a dad? How does that look differently? Like, what does research say? What does the Bible say about your roles as mom and dad?
Well, I think that when you think about the difference in moms and dads, children watching, so how you treat each other, how you are respectful towards each other. It's teaching a son what it looks like to teach, to treat a woman with honor and respect. How do you engage with her in conversation? And how do you look at her in a way that is honoring? The culture does not teach that. And for girls to have a dad who loves her, engages with her, calls out her giftedness, when you have that in your home, girls are much more less likely to go looking for love in all the wrong places, if you will, seeking it out in ways that aren't healthy. When you have a family where mom and dad and kids sit down at the dinner table together and engage in conversation, learn manners, learn critical thinking skills, how to debate about a topic that maybe you don't all agree on, and still love each other well, just eating dinner together, it's just like counterintuitive, because what are you doing? You're just eating together, but you're actually doing so much more together that creates this protective factor for kids. They're less likely to be involved in risky behavior, less likely to drink alcohol, less likely to just do things that are not good for them. So you're creating this hedge of protection. And as parents, we are called to teach our children, to be actively involved in discipling them. You have been entrusted with this responsibility. And I think it's really important to think about your children belong to God first. They were given to you, and now you get to steward this gift of responsibility to help them grow up, to know the word, to own their faith, to understand what it's like to engage with someone who's being disrespectful to them. I can remember having a conversation with Ashley. She came home one day and she goes, "Mom, Mr. So-and-so was so disrespectful in class, and my friends, they just gave it right back to him." And I looked at her and I said, if we are having this conversation because you think I'm going to look at you and say that your teacher's disrespect would justify you being disrespectful back, you are sorely mistaken, because that is not what Jesus teaches. He teaches us that even when we are treated disrespectfully, we are called to be respectful. So that's a really important lesson learned here. So just all the way through the process, we're teaching. And we're helping to model and shape. And are we going to make mistakes? 100%. I mean, goodness, I am not a perfect parent. But my intentions were pure. And I think that that's what you're always asking yourself. Are my intentions pure? Yeah. So I'm going to come back and say, I made a mistake here. I need to come back and we need to have this conversation again. And I want to do this over.
So overarchingly, it is possible not to be a perfect parent, not to be a perfect spouse, but it is possible to thrive in your marriage relationship, in your parenting, and do so together. And I think you've given us lots of great tools and things to think about from this conversation. So I really appreciate your time today and just kind of breaking that down. I know I've been encouraged and has given me a lot of things to chew on and think about even for the future. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in to the WinShape Marriage Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with myself and Julie. We'll be back next week with another episode. Have a marriage question you'd like answered on the show? We'd love to hear from you. Visit winshapemarriage.org/podcast to submit your question today.